Hi there. In this next part of my tutorial series on building a VR escape room in Unity, we're going to use all of the XR Interaction Toolkit's interactable events to kind of hook up the gameplay loop of just going through a small journey through an escape room. In particular, we're going to talk about turning on objects and also lights, both from a gameplay perspective and also for optimization. And then in the next tutorial, we'll go through the same thing with sound. Here's how this is going to work. My goal is to walk in this room, get locked in, see that there is a red button here, and notice that it's got a spotlight on it. So I walk over and I press it. And that's going to make a crystal appear, which I'm going to grab and throw in this brazier, which will start not burning, but then when I throw the crystal in, it'll burn. And then that will make the last push button appear, which I will then press, and that'll unlock the door. So I can make all that stuff happen in the inspector just by kind of turning things on and off. But all these interactable events allow us to do that in the inspector without having to code anything. But it can happen in runtime. You know, it can happen when the player does this stuff. So cool. Remember from the last time in a previous tutorial we discussed simple interactables, which are just like what's happening on this button. It has a series of interactable events, things like hover, select, and activate. And remember, hover means we're touching the collider that's on this thing. So that's how I'm going to make this button work. I'm going to add something to the list of what happens when you enter hover and when you put your hand into the collider here. I'm going to hit plus, and what's going to happen is we'll take this crystal object, drop it in here, and then in the function we'll say game object set active, and we want it to set active check, which means like yes, make it active, true. So now what's going to happen is when we touch this button, the crystal will appear. Okay. The next thing I want to do though is we are going to use these spotlights as a kind of guidance, a sort of breadcrumb trail through the game. So when it's time to move over here, this spotlight will turn off and this spotlight will turn on. And that's kind of going to give our player a sense of where they should pay attention. The other thing it's going to do, though, is it's going to bring up for us the opportunity to learn about optimization, at least in the simplest sense. Each time you add a real-time light to a Unity project, you're giving Unity some whole set of problems to calculate. You know, things like where are the shadows and how does the light hit each surface. And if they're real-time lights, that means that any of them could potentially move or animate or turn off or any of that kind of stuff. And that takes a lot of computing power. Not so big a problem when you are on the actual computer, but when you build to a headset, like a standalone headset like Quest 2, lights can be a performance issue. They can really slow things down. So we're going to solve that by baking a lot of these lights, which I'll get to in a future tutorial. And then the lights that we are turning on and off, we're only going to ever have one real-time light on at a time. That'll help us guide our viewers' attention, but it'll also help us to keep the real-time lights from taxing performance. So every time we hit a button or do the next thing, we're going to turn off the current light and turn on the next one. So we do this by adding a second item to this hover list, and that's going to be the spotlight here that's on right now. We're going to game object set active, and turn it off. And then we're going to add yet another object to the list, and that'll be the spotlight that is over top of the crystal this time. The one that is not currently on, we want to turn that one, game object, set active, on. Okay, so now what's happening is when we press this button, this light goes off, the crystal appears, and the light above it turns on. So the next link in our chain around the escape room we're building is going to use the crystal, which is a grab interactable. And the way this is different is that when you grab a grab interactable, it also has hover and select and activated. But hover would mean we were just touching it. Select means we're grabbing it. And so I want to do something on select with this crystal. We're following these lights around, so when I press the first button, the button light turns off, the spotlight above the crystal turns on. But what I want to have happen now is when I've picked up the crystal, I'd like the crystal spotlight to turn off, and I want a light over here to turn on. I want it to be sort of a hint that the crystal should be put in here. So I'm trying to use a kind of a purpley light to go with the purple color of the crystal. I'm hoping people put this together, you know, that this thing is supposed to go in here. And we see that when the purple light turns on, which only happens when we grab the crystal. So, okay, we'll start with the purple light off. We'll go to the crystal. And again, instead of using hover, we're going to use one of the select functions. But it's not just going to be select. In this case, I want to use first select. And the reason is because every time we grab the crystal, select fires, but first select is just the first time. This is especially important because it counts as a select when you grab the object, but it also counts as a select when you put a grabbable object into a socket. The socket selects the grabbable object. So I don't want lights turning on and off, accidentally. So I'm just going to use the first select. So we hit plus in the first select, and we're going to turn off the spotlight and turn on the point light. Okay, let's check our work. When we press the button, the light turns off and the crystal turns on and its light turns on. We can grab it, the light turns off, we walk it over here, this light has turned on, and now when we drop it in, the fire turns on and that button turns on. Only problem here is I don't like how the crystal looks burning. I think we should just make the crystal disappear. So to do that, we're going to go to the socket underneath our Brazier and its socket interactor. In a previous tutorial, we hooked up these. This is what made this push button appear and this particle system fire turn on. But we have one more thing we'd like to do with it. We're going to add an item to the list. We're going to address this crystal and we're going to turn it off. It's also time to continue our path of turning on and off lights all the way around the room. So we'll grab the point light that was our purple light. That one's going to go off. And finally, we will get the spotlight above the last push button and turn that one on. The last thing that we want to do from a gameplay perspective here is this final push button needs to open our door so that we can win the game and get out of the escape room. So this again is a simple interactable, so we're back to using hover, and we're going to hit plus in the hover, and we'd like to make this door disappear. So this door, in my case, I put it as a child under the room game object, and it's here. It's door 1. That's the one that is currently locking us in. So this one, for testing purposes, I have open, but in a future tutorial, I will show you how to close both these doors when we cross into a collider in this room. So we'll kind of test, is the player in the room, and then we'll close the doors on them. We'll do that with a short script, a little piece of code. But for now, we can stay out here in the graphical user interface and just open this door. So our push button is going to affect door 1, and it's going to turn it off. So that should do it. Let's test our functionality. Okay, we press the button. Light off, light on, crystal on. Light off, light on, drop it in, light off, fire on, button on, light on, hit the button, out the door. But we should probably turn the light off on our way out to conserve energy. So one last thing before we go, we turn the light off on our way out the door. So we'll put the spotlight in hover and set it not to be active. Okay, so that's the logic of using these interactable events to create gameplay, you know, to let the user touch, manipulate, grab, and drop objects, and let that change, you know, parameters and settings in our game world. In the next tutorial, we'll follow this same logic, but with sound and audio sources, and that's going to have a couple of different wrinkles.